Everything we do here at James Project focuses on caring for vulnerable women and children because we believe that's the call that God has placed on every one of us as Christians.
Hey everyone, we're back with another episode of the podcast for the James Project. And today I have two wonderful ladies from the Kansas City area, Chelsie Carroll and Tiffany Danley. And we're going to talk to them today about their experience and their little bit of their backstories and what the James Project means to them. So they met through interesting circumstances. Tiffany had a son that went to Chelsea's at-home daycare, right, for a couple of years. Yes. Yes. And Chelsie was a stay-at-home mom, and Tiffany and her family started inviting them to church, and they went a couple of times. And then when Chelsea's daughter was old enough for the preschool, Tiffany invited them to check out the preschool at the Christ Lutheran Education Center, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. And the rest is history, they say, but we'll get to that because now you both work at the Christ Lutheran Center, right?
Correct.
Okay. And you can tell us a little bit about that in a minute, but tell us a little bit about yourselves. Where are you from? How you grew up, that kind of stuff.
Sure. Do you want to go first, Chels?
Sure. I actually grew up in a small town in North Missouri. It's Savannah, Missouri. Like I said, small little country town. I actually didn't really grow up going to church. If we went to church, it was randomly with a friend or maybe with the neighbor. So coming not from a background of learning about Christ and the unconditional love and all of that, it was really, eye-opening as Tiffany and her husband and kids entered our lives. I do have Layton, like you said, she's my daughter. She's 5, and I have a little boy. He's 2.5. His name's Hudson, and Christopher is my husband. We now live in another small little country town here close to the church. It's DeSoto, Kansas. We're really just into being outside, spending weekends camping and things like that, just as a family. So, yeah, just a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Tiffany, I grew up mostly in the Kansas City area. I've spent the majority of my life here, with, dabbling and going away to college. And then my husband and I lived in Arizona for a little bit, post-college, but I grew up in the faith. My great-grandfather was a Lutheran pastor. And so my mom was born and raised, as well as myself and my siblings. We were raised in a household of faith, and that's always been a blessing to me. But I would say that it wasn't until high school that I really started to have the opportunity to own my faith and to shape it in a way that made most sense to me. And I remember my senior year having one of those mountaintop experiences during high school, one of our high school trips. And it was at that point that I had decided that I wanted to go into full-time ministry and go to a college that would support that through a theology degree. And so, which is where I met my husband. And he also works in the church. He's a director over all of our youth and children's ministry here at Christ Lutheran. And we have 3 kiddos, Tenley, who is 11, Sibby, who's 8, and Corbin, who is almost 5 at the end of this month. And they keep us busy. I would say they are our hobby. But when it comes to ministry, I graduated with an education degree in early childhood and did my best to run from what God wanted me to do. And but, he brought it back around when it came to being called to Christ Lutheran. And I went into adult ministry with being the director of discipleship and outreach here. And it's just been a real blessing to kind of see that come full circle for me and to be where God has placed me. And I'm really blessed to get to work with the team that I have. So.
That's great. And Chelsie, what is it that you do? You're the benevolence coordinator, correct?
I am. JPLA is actually kind of what led me, I feel like, into this role. I started as the ambassador on our benevolence team, which is volunteer work. It was actually September of this year. And so leading into that, getting to see what the benevolence team was and what kind of work that entails, I felt that as the position open for the benevolence coordinator, God had led me down that path and opened that position for me.
And so what exactly does that entail? I always hear about benevolence, and we have it at our church as well. And I know it's helping people in need, right? In the area?
Yeah, I feel like there's actually a lot that goes on behind the scenes. I get to just communicate with, we have 12 main partners, and I get to be the main contact. And we actually support each member, each partner every month. And so there's one individual partner that we're supporting for that entire month. And I get to, walk alongside them and see what their basic needs are for that month and how we as a whole congregation can really come together and help them. And it really just gives a big opportunity for our congregation to go out into the community and help those partners. And it showcases what the volunteer opportunities can be or how they can get involved face to face. And we like to refer to it as boots on the ground. We just want our congregation to get out and serve those in need, because really that's what God is calling us all to do. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds wonderful. Sounds like an interesting job too. It's something different all the time.
It is. I love it.
And Tiffany, you said adult ministries is yours.
Yeah, I would say majority focus is on adults, but obviously director of discipleship and outreach would, span all of our ministry areas, because discipleship and outreach really happens at every level of ministry and in every facet of ministry. So I do get to team with all of our other directors in the different areas and do a lot of crossover opportunities. But for the most part, I work with like our small group ministry, our large group ministry, but also all of our outreach efforts. And then our overall discipleship process through our worship space, as well as like our classroom environments as well.
That's great. And you said you have a congregation of about 400 to 500?
Yeah, I think, on an average weekend, we probably worship between 5 and 6. I think there's probably more in terms of our roles, but just what we would see on a weekend would be between 500 and 600.
Okay. That's a big group. So you guys have big jobs.
Yeah.
Okay, Chelsie, you are now working at this church, but you had said before that you didn't grow up in the faith and you only went to church every once in a while with friends. So how did God get you to this place?
Looking back on it, I can see all of the handprints all over my life, actually. And I really appreciate that. And I feel like it's given me such a valuable, just a more loving connection with Christ, because looking back, I can see where he was. And I didn't think he was there because I hadn't grown up in church. I would hear about God and I thought I knew who he was, but I never had the relationship with him that I do now. And I actually remember going to church one time with one of my high school friends and hearing that they were going on a mission trip and what that looked like and what they were going to be doing. And I felt so called to want to do that. And I asked about it, and they had actually told me that I wasn't able to go because I'm not a member of their church. And I felt, so many different emotions. Like I was embarrassed, I was sad, all of the things. And so I think I've really carried that with me since high school. And I have seen, just on social media, other people going on these mission trips. And it has just been something I have always wanted to do. And then fast forward, whenever I started in home daycare and Tiffany and Corey started bringing Corbin, we would chat at pickups and drop-offs, and they would be coming from work, which was church. And so we would talk a little bit about that, and we would get those subtle invites. Do you want to come to Mother's Day for church? We have this going on at church. Do you guys think you would want to come? And if I'm being completely honest, I think my husband and we would go sometimes more out of feeling guilty and just that obligation to need to go. And the first 2 times that we went, I think he and I will both tell you that we felt something. It was a calming, just kind of at-home presence, but I don't think that we were ready to commit to whatever that was. It was just the unknown. And then as soon as our kiddos turned 2.5, we knew Corbin would be going to Christ Lutheran Early Education Center, and Tiffany and Corey had mentioned, what a great program that is and what it entails. And I mean, it entailed everything that we wanted for our daughter. And without a question, we said, yes, we're going to have her go there. And it was about 6 months of her being there. Things just really started fast rolling for me specifically. I look at it now. My daughter was discipling me at 3, 4, and now 5 years old. She would just tell me all of these stories about God and Jesus and how much he loves you. And there was one specific instance that really just put me there and made me feel called to, like, I need to step up for her and for my family. It was Christmas, and she was behind the couch, and she's just talking, telling this big story. And I go over there and I'm like, what are you doing? And she's got a notepad and she's drawing. She's drawn the entire nativity scene and telling me who is who, what the angels are doing, why the animals are around to warm Jesus up. And I just, again, it was such an eye-opening moment that this little girl knows all about this love that I don't know anything about. And it was after that I told Tiffany, I feel like I need to be doing more. How can I get involved? Like, I want to be there for my daughter. And then she had actually let me know that there was an opening on our benevolence team for JPLA, which is, such a huge opportunity for mission work. And I said yes without hesitation and went to my first meeting, and I was ready to go. And I called her that night, I think, and I told her, I want to go to Guatemala with you guys. And I've heard her talk about it quite often because she had gone the year before I did. And I never really said anything because I wasn't sure if I could go. And that night I told her, I'm ready to go. I want to take this step. And from there, then I had signed up, went to the information meeting, and then the benevolence coordinator position came open. And she's like, I know that you're still at home with Hudson, but what do you think? What does this sound like? And again, without hesitation, I said yes. And now we are on the same team. And I'm so thankful for all of the things that Christ has led me to do. And again, I just value the relationship I have with him. And looking back, he's always been there. I wasn't ready to see it.
That's really beautiful. I love how you point out that when you look back now, you can see all the places he was in your life and all the things he was doing for you, even though you didn't recognize it at the time. It's really
Absolutely
a beautiful thing. I think sometimes people that grew up in the faith, I think, Tiffany, you might agree with me that we can kind of take that for granted, and we tend to see it less where he's been because it's more just what we've grown up with. I know my kids would say that for a long time. My daughter was like, this is just how I've grown up. She's since made her faith her own, but it is harder to look back and see sometimes when you've had it your whole life. So I like that you can recognize that and you see him show up.
Absolutely. And I think that what's really inspirational about Chelsie and her family is just that, like you said, for people that I've known personally that come to faith later in life, there's just nothing taken for granted, and they waste no time in getting involved. And I think often, especially for people that grow up in the faith, it's like we get this message of, this need for competency before we can act on anything. And so we spend all this time trying to prepare ourselves and arrive, when really, I mean, the second we're called, we've been gifted with the Holy Spirit and have the ability to share with others. And it's just been really cool to see Chelsie and Chris waste no time in really just getting elbows deep in the mission and what we've been called to do, and in building not only their personal relationship with Christ, but to disciple their children as well. And for Corey and I, it's really, it's so rewarding to have gotten to have a front row seat to all of it, because, I think there were often times where Chelsie would just keep telling me thank you. And I'm like, this is not me, and really, if there's anything that I would encourage anybody with, is that the main tool that we utilized was prayer. And it was through a more tangible tool called blesseveryhome.com. It's an online resource where you can sign up to be a light in your neighborhood, and it sends you a reminder to pray for your neighbors. And it talks about how, like, really all we need to do is start in prayer, and the that we need to trust that Jesus is already at work there. And he really was, like Chelsie said, he was present in her life way before I ever was, and doing the work way before I ever, had any part of it. But on top of that, I think prayer helped me to be more obedient to hearing those times where I'd pick up Corbin from daycare and feel this prodding of, you're supposed to invite this family. You're supposed to disciple this family. And I remember the day that I got the message that God wanted them to be baptized. And I was like, you're crazy. I'm not saying a word. I'm never going to bring that up. But it was really rewarding that just a little over a year ago, we got to see their whole family go through the waters of baptism. And I mean, I can't express how much that meant to me and how much that helped me grow in my own faith, just in the reward of like stepping into that obedience, but then also watching them step into their obedience and their relationship with Christ, and taking those steps of baptism. And then, just Chelsie having no hesitation whatsoever in taking on some of these roles that I think sometimes people are really intimidated by, and sometimes you hear people say, oh, leave it to the professionals. Chelsie was not that way. She was ready to go. And I think there are moments where she'll tell you that she questions herself, but she flourishes because I think she's obedient to what she's been called to do. So,
yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. And such a great testimony to what we should be doing as believers, Tiffany, the people that have grown up in the faith, to really press in and be obedient and not feel like we have to have it all together and figured out before we can reach out to someone. Because I think you're right. We do have that tendency that, and the leave it to the professionals. For us, we think that too. Sometimes it's up to the pastor or, whoever, to reach that person. It's not my job. I don't know, I'm not qualified or whatever. So it's such a great testimony to both of you, as far as what God has done in your lives and how he's used your relationship with each other and the way he's worked in your lives to bring that together. So beautiful story.
Yeah.
You had told me something before, Chelsie, about the bittersweetness of coming to Jesus later in life. Can you expound on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Expound.
Looking at my life before and just my past, I think there was a lot of guilt in the way that I handled a lot of situations. And I have said it quite a few times, I think in the last couple of months, if only I knew then what I knew now, and I wouldn't have made those decisions. If I knew, I knew what sin was, but I didn't know what it was. And now I look back, and I've really had to come to terms with lately understanding that is part of my story, and some of those choices led to who I am now, and I have learned from those things, and God has given me valuable lessons out of those things. And if anything, I think that I can help somebody else, and I can be that person that I needed so badly. And I think that's really what makes it so bittersweet. And I think also I look at my marriage, because we were married before he and I knew Christ. And I think that it would have changed so much for us. But now, since we've been through so many hard things, we get to lean on Christ and him only, and have peace and comfort in knowing that everything's going to be okay. So I think that's where the word bittersweet comes from, because there was a lot of hard, but now it's a lot easier knowing that we have him, and just, again, that peace and comfort to, if we do struggle in our marriage, that's who we're going to. If we're struggling with our kids and making choices, we get to pray and just know that we will be where we're meant to be, and we will be led where we're supposed to.
It is such a freeing thought to know Christ and to know what he's doing in our lives and to be able to trust him. It takes some time to get there, even for people who grow up in the faith. I know for me, I grew up in the faith, but we didn't necessarily live it at home as much. And so when I finally became a mom, it was a long process of getting rid of a lot of stuff that I'd collected for myself, as far as trying to do it my way, and the sin. I mean, even believers who grew up in the faith make a lot of poor choices, especially as a young adult. And, you bring all that into adulthood, and you have to figure out how to work through that as well. So but it's so much better on the other side of that. It's a lot of work to unlearn a lot of behaviors and a lot of patterns and a lot of thought processes, but I think it's so worth the work, in my opinion.
I agree.
So now that we've gotten that out of the way, what led you to the JPLA the first time, Tiffany? Because you went for the first time in 2023, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I work with Pastor Russ. He was our director of outreach and member engagement, and I was just discipleship. But we were feeling a call to kind of reshape our department so that he could step into more of a teaching pastor role. And so in turn, I was going to take on some of his outreach responsibilities. And I do like a dynamic situation. So I was really kind of excited about the new challenge of taking on the facet of outreach. And so one of those things was to lead and plan our mission trip team. So the year prior to this one, I went just as a team member, which was such an incredible experience because we took a team of 10 and I was the only one that hadn't been before. So the team made sure I had the full experience. I wouldn't say it was hazing, but they did make sure that I experienced everything. You want to harvest a banana tree? Yes. You want to ride in a tuk-tuk? Yes. And so I had decided that trip, my answer was yes the whole time. So, and it just, what a blessing that was to be able to experience it all and to really just to fall in love with the people of Guatemala, but also the mission of JPLA and Shout of His Wings. And so then the next year, I took over the administrative parts of the trip. Pastor Russ still goes with us as the pastor on our team and steps into a lot of the discipleship moments there as well. But I was just the one in charge of all of the logistics and everything. And then we also have another team member who is well known and well loved at JPLA. His name is Brian. And so we got to plan together. And so I now am in charge of that team moving forward for however long the Lord allows, but I wouldn't want it any other way.
What a great attitude to have, just that your answer is going to be yes to the whole trip. Because there's a lot of new experiences when you go down there, right? Like a lot of different things you've never experienced before. So way to be brave and say yes. The first year I went, I did not say yes to a lot of things. I was more of an observer.
Sure.
Just kind of sat back. I was like, I don't know. I'm going to participate to the extent I feel like I participate. But
yeah.
So, all right. So you led this one and Chelsie was ready to go, right, Chelsie?
I was. Yep.
So tell us about your experience going down for the first time. Were you the only one that was going down for the first time on this team or no?
No, there was actually quite a few of us that were new, which is great. We had our leaders that we looked up to that had been there, and everybody that had gone quite a few years. So they were very experienced, and then there were us that were new. And so it was really comforting to know if anything happened, we were going to lean on them and they knew what they were doing. I think, working with Tiffany in the last year, I've heard so much about the mission trip. I felt like I knew what I was getting into. I felt like I knew what emotions to expect, and everybody has their own experience. And I don't think you truly know what it's going to be like until you get down there. And it was such an amazing experience, and I'm so thankful. But I think emotionally you do have to prepare yourself a little bit. And I think that was something that maybe I struggled with a little bit because I run emotionally high, which I don't think is always a bad thing, but I wish I would have gotten myself prepared a little bit more for that part.
What do you think was difficult about not feeling emotionally prepared?
I know others would disagree, but I think being a mother myself and having 2 small children, I wish I could have put on a braver face for these children, because I think a lot of the times they would look at me and I did have tears streaming down my face just from looking at these little faces. And I'm hopeful that next year I can go back and just be that really strong presence for them. And again, I know showing emotions are not a bad thing, but when you're looking at these children who have been hurt, my goal is to be that really solid foundation for them to hug and be embraced and not have tears falling all over their little heads.
But it may have been something they needed, because I think sometimes we try to put on too brave a face, and they might not feel seen. Do you know what I mean? Like, for what they've really experienced. So maybe God used that in a way that you don't even know, that some of those kids needed to see that you were heartbroken for what they've been through. Do you know what I mean? Because I think we go down, all excited to help them out, and put on this brave face, like we're going to just be joyful the whole time. But the reality is their life has been hard. And so to show that emotion and to show that heartbreak for them is probably healing for them as well. So don't beat yourself up too much.
Well, and I think the biggest struggle for me is I am a huge eye contact person, and you can see the pain in some of these children's eyes. And when they're looking at you and we don't speak the same language, and you can see just that huge amount of pain in their eyes. And that's all I really had with them was eye contact and physical touch, because I did not learn Spanish, unfortunately, before I went there. And we could just look at each other, and you just feel what they're feeling. And that just brings a lot of emotion to you.
Yeah. But like I said, I'm sure they appreciated that, a lot of them, to be seen for what's underneath. And they don't feel like they have to put on a brave face either for you, that they can be themselves.
And I think it speaks to that universal language. I remember that was like something they taught us that very first year when we went down. Rebecca had told us, yes, we don't speak the same primary language in terms of, our communication, but we do have a universal language that's based in the love of Christ. And I think that helps us to identify when we're hurting, when we're joyful, when we're anxious. Those are things that we can tell because we were all shaped and created in the same image of God. And so it is kind of a beautiful thing to be able to travel to, a country that has a completely different culture and language, but to be able to have that same heart language that's based in our faith. And I don't know, I think that's one thing that I've always admired about Chelsie is I feel like people they read that about her immediately, that there's just this comfort and this safety and security that they can share what they need to share with her, whether it's spoken or just in that eye contact. And I remember just watching the kids just connect with her, especially her sponsor daughter. There was not a lot of spoken words, but there was a lot of spoken body language. And it was just, I don't know, really cool to witness for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I love watching, when I bring a team down, the unique characteristics of each person on that team and how God uses them to connect with the different kids and the house parents and the staff. And it's really, it's a beautiful thing to see how, even though we're all wired so differently and we all have different tendencies, that God uses each one of us in a different and unique way. It's a beautiful thing.
I think for Chelsie and I, we were talking about just how much of a blessing this trip was, just even to our personal friendship. I think it brought us to a level that we hadn't experienced prior to. I mean, we've been through a lot together already, just in some of the things we've shared with each other and some of the things that God has worked between us. But this particular trip, we had kind of talked about how it really helped us to kind of streamline some things and prioritize the most important things when it came to the way that we challenged each other and supported each other. And I think it was such a gift to be able to come home with somebody that understood, because I think that you do come home, and that's one part about going on the trip and that makes reentry so difficult, is you get back and you just feel like no one understands what you've just experienced or what you're feeling inside. And you do have those feelings of guilt because you feel detached for a while, and you question why I can't, love my children the way I did or love my spouse the way I did before I left. And, I think we just have a hard time re-entering those feelings because we've just been through something so traumatic, but also incredibly full of blessings as well. So it was just nice to have that for us and to have that unspoken bond because of it.
Mm-hmm. That is a beautiful thing. And I hear that a lot when people come back, they're like, no one's going to understand. And, I had a team leader who was great. And he would always tell us that, when you come back, people aren't going to understand. They're not going to want to hear it. And I was blessed to go every time with my kids. So we've been able to share it for years now. And it's just been, so I understand where you're coming from with that unspoken bond and that understanding, and you work together and you're friends so that you get to experience that on a regular basis. So that is really nice. So when you talk about the traumatic experience, what are the emotions? Just try to help people understand what are some of the emotions. You've talked about being sad and heartbroken for what these kids have been through. What are some other emotions that you experience when you go?
Is this question for me? Because you cut out for a little bit.
Okay. Yes, it's for both. Okay. But it's just, what other emotions, if we're trying to help people understand a little bit about what a trip would be like, I agree. I don't think anyone can really fathom what it's like until they go. But you're talking a lot about the deep emotions and the trauma and the difficulty re-entering. What are some of the other emotions that you deal with when you go on a trip like this?
Well, I think that the experience is such a high, especially because you're going to a completely different country, which, while I think that, we talk a lot about like the trauma and the crime and the poverty, there's also a lot of beauty in Guatemala. And so it becomes a different rhythm, and you get to experience something that's very different from your life back home. And I think it helped me at least to realize just the benefit in having a different rhythm, but also I think it helped me to really like appreciate kind of like I was talking about with me and Chelsea's friendship. You prioritize the most important things. You start to identify the things that you've allowed to take up too much real estate in your mind and in your life. And I think one of the things that struck me the first year the most was just the generosity of these people who, many of them didn't have a lot. Some of them had everything taken from them without even being asked. But you still see a generosity and a sense of community and family that's just, I don't know, it's indescribable in some points. But I remember specifically the first year there was a little girl who volunteered to read our Bible story for us, and maybe took her 30 seconds to finish it. But the leaders, we gave her a candy bar in exchange for, being brave and getting up in front of all of her peers and reading in front of them. But instead of keeping that candy bar for herself, she went back and she broke it up into 10 pieces and gave one piece to each of the other little girls in her house. And I don't know. I lost it in the moment. It was like day 5. I think I was exhausted by that point. But I just remember thinking, like, these children have nothing. And my children will fight over who gets the last Oreo in the package, So it's just to watch her be generous with these other children and to do life together was just such a beautiful thing for me. And so I think it does help you to kind of trim the fat, so to speak, back home in terms of the things that are not life-giving and the things that aren't blessing your relationships with God and with others.
Yeah. And what about you, Chelsie? What other emotions would you describe you experience when you go down there? And what makes it so hard to come back?
Honestly, it kind of aligns with what Tiffany said. Just being down there, the simplicity of everything about the James Project. You wake up, and I think the most valuable, I guess maybe my favorite memory is waking up, getting my coffee, going outside. The kids are getting ready to go to school. The sun is coming up. You're just looking at God's glory. And then you have 20 kids pouring at you, ready to just come and smother you with love. And minus all of the trauma that they've endured, they are so ready to just love on everybody. If you walk past somebody and you don't know them, they're going to hug you. They're going to show you kindness. And just, washing dishes and the clothes there, it's such a simple act of, daily life, but they do it together, side by side, and they do it with a smile on their face. And I just loved the energy that was there despite all of the horrible things that some of those children have endured. And I think witnessing God's love and his work through that entire project is just a testimony in itself of what life could and should be for all of us. Whenever you put him at the top and make him the priority, it just flows down from there. And I think, as Tiffany mentioned, coming back here, I think that was just the absolute hardest thing for me. And my kids and my husband did not understand. And I was trying to explain it, but in a way, I kind of also wanted to keep it to myself because it was such a special thing to me. And I've had to talk to my children a lot and explain to them, mommy is just sad because I've left all of those kids behind that I have now formed really intimate relationships with. And I'm trying to, I think the first time we came home, my son was having a meltdown over what he wanted for breakfast. And I just had zero patience for it, to be honest with you. I said, you know what? This isn't how we're going to be anymore. You need to be thankful that you have food in front of you and you have a roof over your head. And I just think that they were so confused as to who their mother was and what life changes that they were about to endure. And now I love it because they'll say, mommy, are there kids in Guatemala that don't have this, or do they have this? And I just love that they are kind of getting in that mindset. They're 2 and 5, so they're doing what they can, I think, but it's helped me teach them the valuable things that we should be thankful for and the things that are not so important. And with my husband, I think it was emotionally straining for him and I, because there were times that I would cry myself to sleep because of some of the things, and he would want me to be vulnerable and talk with him about it, but I just wasn't ready. And quite honestly, I think I've kind of pushed it back a little bit still. And I've talked about it some, just the stories that we experienced. And so with that being said, he does want to come with me next year, and we're hoping we get to go together to experience that and kind of hopefully help him understand what that's like. But it's so hard when you have all of these happy memories there, and then right behind it are just some really, really sad things, and you're trying to put those two together, and you're not sure if it was what kind of experience it was for you. Really, it's just an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah, it really is. And I love that you're honest and say that part of it was that you wanted to hold on to it for yourself. Like, you wanted to be a little selfish with that experience. And I understand where you're coming from. It is such a deeply felt personal experience as well, because I think we all learn something about God through that experience. And it's as if he's showing us something we personally need at the time that we're there. Do you know what I mean? I feel like he meets each one of us there with whatever we need to learn from him. And it is hard to share it sometimes. Yeah.
Well, and I think that that's one of the opportunities that you have when you are blessed to be able to go on a mission trip, is that chance to catch the vision and take it back. And not only in a way that encourages others to come and see for themselves, but to also challenge the rhythms that we have here back in the States, where it comes to like our own faith and rituals and habits, that we can allow the experiences there to shape what we do here and to be radical among people that we live with here, and in order to just help others to grow in their faith. But I mean, my husband as well is considering the trip for this next year. And so it's just really cool to be able to share those feelings finally with them in a way that, like I've said, is kind of unspoken. It's this universal language in some aspects, but it's really hard to verbally communicate or to paint that picture. And so to be able to share that with others is really, I think, part of the blessing of going on the trip, is just catching that vision and bringing it back.
Yeah. And what a beautiful thing to be able to, in your families, because you have a vision for your family, right? And then you two go on these trips and your vision changes a little bit because you see what God can do and you see what he wants from us in a different light, and you bring that back. And if your husbands haven't experienced it, it's hard to find a shared vision with that in mind. So that'll be a wonderful, we'll have to have you back after you have your husbands go and see how it went. But But yeah, I have a team member who went with us last year for the second time it was the first time she'd been on my team, but prior to that in February, she'd gone on the team we used to join and with her husband. And she didn't think her husband would ever go. And he just melted there. And he's now been twice, and he's going to go every year, that he can. But it is, it's so, for her, when she went on my team, she was explaining what a blessing it was to see him melt and to see him just become so vulnerable with these kids and open and loving and break down, because it really does break down your barriers when you see the pain and you hear the stories of these kids, yet somehow God works in their lives in a way that they're able to keep loving. I mean, we look at our kids that are in trouble here, right? And they've come from hard situations, they're in foster care or different things, and it's hard. They shut down, they build up walls, they don't let people in, and you can't help them as much as you would like to a lot of times. But there, it's so different. The model is so very different, and love is just poured into them in such a way that breaks down those walls, and they're able to then love others, and we get to be the recipients of that when we get down, that unconditional love. And it's really just so healing for everyone involved. I don't think there's a single person that goes down and isn't touched in some way by those kids, and the kids by us, hopefully. I look forward to hearing about your husband's visits. So you both sponsor kids down there, right? That's part of what we can do when we go down. We can, if we connect with a child, we can sponsor. We don't have to go down to do it. Their bios are on the internet. And when we're down there and we sponsor one, we get to spend some time with them. So tell me a little bit about the impact that sponsoring a child has had on your lives.
I feel like I can go off of what you just said of, them having love poured into them and then them pouring it back out to us. I thought one of the most incredible things whenever I was down there was with my sponsor daughter. I actually sponsor her and her daughter. She's 16 and her daughter is 2. And so beforehand, I got to write with her just a couple times. So we didn't get to really form a good established foundation before I got down there. But when I got down there, we did use our translator on our phones a couple times. But again, it was more just words or just physical touch and just eye contact and hand gestures and whatnot. But anything that I did get to talk with her about, it was so amazing that she resorted back to God's love every time. I would ask her, where does your strength come from? Where does anything that you're doing right now come from? And she gives all the glory to God. And we talked a little bit about just the way that she loves her daughter, and she'll tell you that is God giving her the strength to get up every day and do what she is supposed to do. And along with that, she lives in Casa Maria, which are all of the young mothers and their children. And the most admirable things from those house parents to teach these children how to be mothers to their children, the unity and strength and just love that is poured into that house through God is like nothing I have ever seen. And all of them welcomed me with open arms, even though I had my sponsor daughter and her daughter. It was just this unity of, we all love Christ and he loves us, and this is how we're going to get through this. And it was just amazing watching that and hearing it.
It is so great to see how, and the strength, I'm sure the house parents would tell you the same thing, their strength to love all of these kids, damage and all, and, baggage and all, is from God. And it's incredible to see how his presence just floods that whole space and just pours out into everyone there. And what that can do, like you both have pointed out, what life can look like when we put him at the center and everything flows from there, and how we can come back and change some of those rhythms and make our life look more like that here rather than the worldly stuff that we tend to get caught up in. So
well,
what has it
and I
been
think
like for you?
I have touched base on God's unconditional love, and that's I have felt like true unconditional love for the first time in my life in the last 2 years. And that's something I thought I knew too, and it wasn't. And so to hear my sponsor daughter to be able to talk about that and have that same feeling, and for God to work through all of those parents through JPLA to help these children that have never experienced that in their life, I think that is what I love the absolute most about the James Project, is these kids are really truly finding out the love that they should have felt all along.
Yeah. And the healing that brings for them.
For me, I have a unique situation, not unique to everybody, but I think it's less common. I've chosen to sponsor one of the older children. And I remember my first year there, I was the only one that didn't have a sponsor child going into the trip. And so I had the opportunity to just kind of spend the week getting to know the kids. And don't get me wrong, there were hundreds of little faces that I could have just, immediately said yes to. But I remember during our vision walk, we learned about a teen that had been brought in who had a pretty graphic story. And I remember them telling us that when she got there, that she had expressed that she no longer wanted to be living. And it just broke my heart immediately for her. And in that moment, I felt God saying, that's the one, that's the one I want you to build a relationship with. And so I ended up sponsoring her and got to know her a little bit while I was there. But I think for her, things were still really fresh for her. And so we didn't get a lot of time to bond. But what was kind of really cool about our situation is that with her being older, she turned 18 shortly after that and was able to have her own cell phone. And so she lives in the transition housing. And she has the freedom of talking to me anytime she wants to. And so we've been able to connect over WhatsApp and social media. And so we get to talk on almost a daily basis. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer than that. But just to be able to speak into this young adult's life, but then to also have her touch my own. And so it was really cool this year going back, because at one point she told me that I understood her a lot better this time around. And I think she thought it was a language thing. I think for me, it was a heart thing. I needed time to be able to come to terms with her story and to feel like I was equipped enough to be able to share with her. I felt inadequate where she was concerned and the things that I wanted for her and to be able to give her. But she's just been incredible. And I love just seeing her bravery, the way that she has really overcome the things that she's experienced, and the way that she has so much hope for her future. She told me this week that she wants to go into possibly cosmetology, but also baking. And I think that's so exciting for her to watch her really come into adulthood and to see what it is that she wants to do with her life. And just to want to embrace that and to want to love that life that she's been given again. And so that's just been really cool for me to see and to be able to talk with her on a regular basis, because I feel like our bond has just been really magnified because of the frequency of my communication with her. So.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And you were saying the impact they have on us, right? Like how we feel about sponsoring them. But tell me, what do you think the impact is for them to know that they have you?
I think that she said it a couple times, and my heart just shatters when she says it, but she'll say, I love you like a mom. Aww. And I just, it kills me every time, because I think like she should have had someone that she could have depended on.
Yeah.
So being only able to be there, 1 week out of the year just feels so unfair when it comes to hugging her and showing her that presence of a mother. And I don't pretend to be able to fill that role completely. I think that there's a lot of people there at the James Project that fill that role in terms of being role models and adults in their life that they can look up to and trust and feel safe with. But I just, I can't really put to words what it means to me when she says those things, just because I think it shatters my heart and tugs at it at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how beautiful for her to, I know it would have been great for her to have that all along, right? And it's sad that she doesn't, and it's so hard that we can only be there 1 week of the year. And especially with her being in the city, when you do go, you probably don't get to see her a whole lot, right?
She's still at the campus in the
Transition home there,
Casa, I
Esperanza.
forget, Esperanza. Thank you. Yeah, she lives in Casa Esperanza. She's one of two that was there at the time. And so it was kind of cool to see their living spaces and the way that they are teaching them to be young adults and to manage their own routine and curfew and schedule and income as well, like with a small job. And so just really proud of her just to see her step into that so beautifully. And she's very proud of it. You could just tell she was just very proud of her space. So
That's wonderful. But how wonderful that even though she hasn't had what we would love for her to have had right from the beginning, that she has you and she has all of the other people that are speaking into her life. Like it, as heartbreaking as it is, it's also very beautiful that God still provides, just in a different way.
absolutely.
Yeah. So the transition home, because I just mentioned the one in the city and the one at the project, we'll just cover that really quickly. The one in the city is for kids going to university, and they live on their own, which I think is so cool. They used to live with some board members and have house parents, but living on their own is so just so good for them, I think. Kind of like a college experience, and they work and they have, school. School is different. It's only Saturdays, which I think is interesting, but it does give them that opportunity to work during the week. And then the transition home at the project is what age are they? 18 when I don't think, or are they younger?
I think it just depends. I think for my sponsor daughter specifically, she's still finishing high school. And so I think they have that on-site opportunity to keep the young adults there to help them to continue their education at a developmentally appropriate level. And then I think eventually she could choose to move into the city with the others. And we did get to spend time with one of the girls that lives in Guatemala City. She is a sponsor daughter of our teammate Brian. And so both on the front and the back end of the trip, we got to see her as well and get to hear about university from her, which was really kind of fun to listen to.
That's good. And even at the transition home on the project, they don't have house parents, right? They're in charge of all of their own care, even though it's on the property, and they have some oversight, obviously, and a little more oversight than in the city. But it's really great that they have that opportunity, because even here, I mean, we see that with foster kids here, the struggle when they age out and there's just nothing and they're just supposed to figure it out as adults. It's so hard, it's hard for kids that grow up in a healthy home to go right into adulthood with no transition. And that's why their parents help them emotionally, mentally, sometimes financially, and support them into young adulthood until they can be on their own. But it's sad to see that in the States, we don't have that kind of system for kids that age out of foster care. I think there are people, I know that there's a couple that trying to work on a home for that situation right in our area, which is a beautiful thing. So but I love that they do that for the kids there, that they have the option to stay, even though they've aged out of the programs, so to speak. They have the option to stay, still be supported somewhat financially and helped through school and even through university. It's a wonderful, wonderful ministry. I just love it.
I think it's a great opportunity too for them to continue to develop their faith as well, because for some of these children, they don't come from homes. Most of them probably don't come from homes that necessarily have a strong faith foundation. And so to be able to also witness that and to have that development at the same time, I think, that's necessary for any age to have that, that community around you.
Right. So Chelsie, what do you think it means for your sponsored daughter to have you? Like you shared what it meant to you, but what do you think it means for her to have you?
In our conversations before and after, again, it's a little bit unique because she has her own daughter. And so as mothers, we're communicating more on a mother to mother level, not a mother to child level anymore. And so I think for her, she's mentioned so much. We share Bible verses that we read to our kids, and she's actually taught me a couple that I get to read to my kids before we go to bed. And so I think it's more just having another motherly figure, a motherly friend, and just having somebody that you can go to that's on the outside of the life that you're living for advice or just to have communication with. And I just think for anybody that's been in some of those situations that those children have been put in, one more person to love you is such a good thing, and to show you what life should be like, and surround yourself with the love, the kindness, and even just reality. Like if she is, she's asked about America and what that's like. And so we're just learning from each other. And I just think it benefits them in so many ways to have somebody else walk alongside them.
And I think it means so much. I love that the project does such a great job explaining to the kids where we've come from, how far we've traveled, why we're there, because I think that is so impactful for them to know that there are people all around the world that want to take time out of their lives to come and love on them, to come and minister to them, to come and care for them, even just for a week. That I can't imagine what that would be like for a kid. Like I'm trying to picture myself as a kid and having a group of people show up at my house for a week to be like, we're just here to love you. How amazing would that be? It's a really, really cool thing that I love that the project fosters in their awareness of what we're doing there. It's not just random strangers that show up and, build chicken coops or something. We're there to love them because we want to be. So I think you're right. You had shared with me before about a particular experience you both had together on a walk one morning or one evening. I can't remember. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was every night we would take a walk because we had roommates that wanted to go to sleep, and we were still so jazzed by our experiences that we would take the opportunity at night to walk the loop and just process the things from the day. And there was one evening, the week that we go, there's a festival that goes on in Monjas, and it goes on till like 2, 3, 4 in the morning. You can hear the music coming in from the city. But we were walking the loop that night, and as we got closer to the administration building and the front gate, we could hear the doorbell, or what we thought was the gate doorbell. And we stood there for a while, and it was pretty persistent. And so we called the team's coordinator and let her know. And initially she said not to worry about it. But as we got off the phone, we both just felt like uncomfortable about the whole thing because, Casa Esperanza is right there. And so Mama Bear was like, I don't know who's outside the gates, and is it someone that's come in from the festival that maybe isn't safe or whatever. So we stood there for a while, and the gate persisted. And then the team's coordinator did end up calling us back and saying, I got a hold of some house parents. They're on their way up. And so a couple of the house parents came up, and they answered the gate, and come to find out it was a child that they were taking in that night that was planned. And so they had the documentation and everything. But I remember standing there in the moment, and I think Chelsie and I both felt like we were intruding, like we were there and shouldn't be. And so a couple of times we tried to kind of back out of the scenario and just say, we're going to let you guys do what you do best, and we'll stay out of your hair. And the house parents were very inclusive. They said, no, stay. We want you to be a part of this. We want you to, be able to experience and see this as well. And so the child that got out of the van, she was 15, I believe. Would you say 15? Probably around that age. She was tall for her age, though. And I remember them all, saying something about how tall she was, because she was taller than all of them. So, but she was 15, and she got out of the van. And I remember noting to myself that she seemed to have her basic needs met, and she didn't seem to have any kind of abusive marks on her, which really kind of then grabbed in my heart, because I realized the reality of what her situation probably was. And I wasn't sure what to do in the moment, but they encouraged us to talk to her. And so I have very limited Spanish. So I did my best to talk to her and just let her know that we were from the United States, and that we were there to just have fun with them and to experience life with them and to share Jesus. And she was very sweet, very, open to listening and smiling, and talked back a little bit. But I just remember thinking in that moment, how strange it must be for her to come from the situation that they literally had said they had just saved her. And so to come from where she was at and to hear that these people were going to take care of her and clothe her and feed her and share, Jesus with her. I can't imagine how that feels in the moment. And so I remember the next day we got up, and that next day we had planned a pizza party for the kids along with some really fun dessert and games and stuff. And I just can't imagine the stark difference between those two realities and what that felt like for her. And I still think about her on a regular basis and just, her integration into the project and what that must feel like for her. But I was really grateful that the parents were willing to include us and allow us to experience that, because I think that's something that'll stick with me for a long time.
What did you think of that, Chelsie?
Honestly, all of the things that Tiffany just mentioned. And then on top of that, at the pizza party, she was integrated with the kids. She was smiling and she was happy. And although she wasn't outgoing and ready to have a blast, you could just see her sense of, I'm okay now. And I think I remember correctly, they had told her, you have a bed now, you're going to go get clean clothes, and you're going to get to rest. And the house dad, that was his main thing, was telling her, you get to rest now. You're going to go back and you're going to get to rest. And so just to imagine, her getting one peaceful night of sleep and then waking up to a pizza party and kids and parents that aren't going to do anything but love you. And it was just, again, I'm so thankful I got to see and be a part of that experience, but that also comes at the cost of what she's gone through. And so I'm just thankful now that she's where she needs to be. And like Tiffany said, I do think about her often.
Yeah. And I've shared before, one of the girls that I sponsor, she's now living on her own, so we can chat a lot as well. But she came from a really hard situation. And the second year I was there and sponsored her for sponsorship night, she shared her whole story. And it was really hard. It was long, many, many years of other homes and different situations that were just so hard. And her life did not immediately change afterwards when she got there, but she explained in detail the night that she got there, which she remembered everything. She remembered it was raining and she was in the back of the truck. But when she came through those gates, she just felt a peace. And it sounds like, because we feel it there, right? When we go, we feel God's presence in a very tangible way. So they must feel it too. And it was so good to hear her. Like I said, her life didn't dramatically change and get better. It was a long road. And she was there many years before she aged out and moved out on her own. But for her to recognize that even in the midst of all the darkness that she'd been through and was still walking through, that peace was there. It sounds like that young girl probably felt that as well. And the welcoming aspect of everyone there for her. And I think that's what helps them integrate so well, even though that's such a stark contrast of realities from where they came from to where they are. So I'm really glad that you had that opportunity to see that and to witness her arrival.
Absolutely.
And just try to imagine what that must be like. It's so hard, I think, for us to imagine, having not grown up that way, having not had to go through those kinds of things, to imagine how hard that must be. And we sit back and we watch them smiling and happy the next day. We're like, oh, that's so great. And it's hard to fathom what's going on in their hearts and their minds and the healing that has to occur, So I'm glad that you got a chance to witness that and still be thinking of her and praying for her as she works through all of that kind of stuff. So when we talked before, you both had an opportunity to have an experience that a lot of teams don't get to have. Because it's not always allowed for different reasons, but you got to visit the women's prison, correct? And that was also a very impactful experience. Can you share a little bit, you don't have to go into a lot of detail, but share a little bit about what that was like and what your takeaway was from that?
Tiffany, do you want to share maybe a little bit?
I can go first. You have more details, I think, that are
That's
unique.
What I was. If you want to just share.
Yeah. So for our group, it was I remember getting our surveys back from our team, and I think it's the experience that everybody was the most befuddled by. I think they couldn't put a finger on why, but they did not enjoy the experience the way that they did with the other opportunities that we had. And I don't think that they necessarily hated it. I think they still felt like it was effective, like it was something that we were supposed to do. But I think they just really struggled internally with how to feel about it and how to process it. I think some of it comes from, trying to go in with an open mind and not have judgment on anybody that's in there. And I think Pastor Russ did a beautiful job in speaking to the women about how, none of us know the reasons why they were incarcerated. And it's not really our job to know why. That's the legal system's job. That's between them and God. And that what we were called to do was to share Christ with them. And so that's what we did. We went to do. And I remember there were a couple times that did feel uncomfortable for me. One, because I felt like it's such an intimate space that you almost feel like you're encroaching on their own personal space. Like it wasn't somewhere that I felt welcomed. And it wasn't necessarily because the women were not hospitable, but because I felt like I was somewhere I shouldn't be, that I was invading their personal space. And so that part was a little uncomfortable. But then I also, in the same moment, I felt for those women because there was still like a sisterhood there. I think that there were some other dynamics at play too that maybe Chelsie can explain, but there also was, I think, a common thread of just having everything taken from them and that they were living a very basic life, even more basic than their peers in Guatemala. And so, they had this space that was pretty, trimmed down, but there was also a beauty there. They have this open air courtyard where all of their laundry was hanging to dry. They had all just finished their laundry, so it smelled, like detergent and fresh. And but there's all these different colors with the sun shining through. And there was just like a sense of beauty there as well, that the women were still there, having their basic needs met and doing it together. And it was, I don't know. You can tell even in my own description, I myself still struggle to process that whole thing, but I am thankful for our time there. And I hope that, we were able to give those women what God wanted for them through our moments that we spent with them.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenging experience for sure. And Chelsie, you did have some other experiences there as well, correct?
I think just to go along again with what Tiffany said, for me, it was just, when you already have such a tiny space to live in, and then to have this entire group of people come in, I mean, we couldn't move. If you wanted to move past somebody, you were going to have to say, excuse me, and still touch them to move. And you have so many personalities in one room. You're not sure if somebody's really happy you're there or if somebody wants you completely out of their space. And so you have to really navigate how you are presenting yourself, and if somebody is wanting, your heart and wants to hear the things that you have to say. And again, without speaking any Spanish, I felt like I was really treading on water because I wanted to be loving and warm and welcoming. And we actually, our craft to do with them was to make these beautiful scarves. They got to pick their own color and make it however they wanted. And I think that they thoroughly enjoyed that and were so thankful because it was one more thing that they got to keep and have. And we took pictures of them with them, and they were so excited to feel beautiful and have this piece that they made. And so I think that was one, just from even a woman to woman, getting to have that feminine piece to have, helping one woman make hers. She actually spoke English, and I was shocked. And she had just said, thank you for coming. And I said, I'm more than happy to be here. And she's like, can I share something with you? And I told her, yes, absolutely. And she had just mentioned, that she wasn't supposed to be there. And I said, well, can you tell me why? And she had just mentioned that she was visiting the town because she had family there, and she was actually supposed to be going home, but she had been stopped, and they told her, that there was trouble and that she was getting arrested. And She said that she was thoroughly confused, and that night, whenever she was arrested and went into jail, that the women there, some of them had begun raping her. And before she had told me this, she told me I needed to be quiet because there are some of the women there that also speak English, and she shouldn't be talking about this. And she said that a couple nights went by and the rape continued, and she just begged God to please make it stop. Just please have them stop. And, you can see the pain in her eyes. And she actually told me that that morning, after she prayed and begged God to make it stop, that these women stopped, and she had not been touched since. And when we were there, she had been there for 10 days going on 11. So this is all brand new. And, she wasn't begging me to help her get out. She wasn't begging me to do anything. She was just sharing her story. And she had let me know, it's okay now. And I'm trying to figure out what I need to do to get out of here. I'm in contact with my family, but that's what's happened to me. And she's like, just be careful. And so after that, I didn't know what to feel. I honestly was so caught off guard in the moment. I wish I had more wisdom and, just things that I could have told her in that moment. But I also look back and God was taking care of her. And she was more so, she had the things to tell me. And I'm not sure why she wanted to share that with me, because again, she was not wanting anything out of telling me that. And I had to take a step back and step out to kind of collect myself. And so again, I think it's just a really, really hard situation for anybody to be put into. And you want to love these women like we're supposed to. And I hope that in that moment she did feel seen and heard and loved. And again, I think about her often too and pray for her.
Yeah. And it sounds like, you said that you were bummed that you didn't have more wisdom for her, but I think you're right. It sounds like she just needed an ear. She needed someone that she could trust to share that with. And you seem to be in the right place at the right time for that. So I'm glad that you had that opportunity, as hard as that must have been. I mean, to hear that and to leave there knowing that there was nothing you could do to really help her had to have been hard.
I think I mentioned it earlier, but that's been something that I've always noticed about Chelsie. People just feel incredibly comfortable with her, and they just can bare their soul in front of her. And I think that God has made her such an open vessel for those kind of experiences. And even if she didn't feel like she had something to say, I think it was probably therapeutic just for that woman to have someone that she could communicate with, right. That the fact that she spoke English, was such a blessing for her, because she got to connect with someone, outside of that prison that could just make her feel safe in being able to hear her story and being able to process it out loud, because sometimes that out loud processing is so much more valuable than that internal processing. So,
yeah. And to have a fellow believer to be able to share that with as well.
Yeah.
It's really important, I'm sure, for her. Yeah. So hopefully she's out and in a safer place at this point. And I think that's one of the things that's hard. Before the Barnabas program, which is the program that follows the kids with social workers and support once they leave the project, if it's deemed necessary. Before that, I remember talking to the house parents and saying, how do you deal with these kids coming and loving on them and raising them, and then having them go back and not knowing what's going on? Do you know what I mean? Because before the Barnabas program, you just didn't know. I mean, my son sponsored a young boy, not the first year we went, I think the second year we went. And then within a few months, we got word that he'd been sent home, and we have no idea where he went, and we were devastated, much less the house parents that have been taking care of him. So that's, I think, one of the hardest parts for me. I don't know how you guys feel about it, is just not always knowing where these kids go back to, not always knowing what they're going back to and how their life is going once they leave, because it's really, unfortunately, not up to the project to decide if they get to stay or not. It's up to the courts. And sometimes the courts down there do not do right by them, unfortunately. And it's heartbreaking. So very similar. I mean, you probably won't necessarily go back to the prison. And so you won't know where this woman ended up or what's happened with her life. I think that's probably the hardest part for me, is just the not knowing. What do you think? Do you experience that?
I feel like our whole team actually experienced that over one child, and she's a mother and she had her baby in Casa Maria, and we all loved her and connected with her and loved on her beautiful little baby. And I think we were all just fathoming, how could this happen to her? She is so young, and her sister was actually in Casa Maria with her baby. And so we were all just tied to her and loved her. And as soon as we came home, we actually got word through Brian that her and her sister were being sent back home again. And I don't think any of us had words. We were confused, we were hurt, and I feel like we were all still wanting to know and wondering, did she go back to her parents? Is she being hurt? Are they okay? And Tiffany, do you have any update? Did we figure out if she was going back to her parents?
I think they were going to a family member was the last that I heard. It wasn't back to the situation that they came from, but it was with next of kin.
And that's what makes it so hard. You don't know.
I think we had one of their experiences that kind of speaks to that. Our team, when we got there, had learned, we knew that the team following us was going to be the team that was coming in to put on the quinceañera celebration for all of the 15-year-olds, and those celebrating their quinceañera. And what we found out while we were there was that there was a girl that was called to the court, and the court decided that she was to return home. And so she was going to miss her quinceañera celebration, but she had already picked out her dress and her shoes and her tiara. And, she was looking forward to that. And it's kind of funny because it was like one of the first nights that we had really interacted with the project. And so half the team was new, but we all immediately, I think, felt this sense of, we've got to pull off a quinceañera for this girl before she returns home, because she's missing out, and we didn't know, again, what kind of situation she was returning to. Would she ever get to celebrate that part of her life? And especially through the lens of faith. So we decided to try and pull off a quinceañera, and I don't share this as a means of building up our team, but just the opportunity that we were just able to step into. And the project teams coordinator, Rebecca and Vanessa both really helped us to make sure that it was a valuable and respectful experience for her. We didn't want to make a mockery of it in not doing it justice, but we were able to pull off a mini quinceañera for her at the end of the evening. But I think what really struck us, and Pastor Russ put it into words the best, I think, was that as he was sharing the message during that ceremony, he felt like he was preaching a wedding message and a funeral message at the same time, because there was just this sense of her growing up and coming into adulthood and celebrating that. But then also this goodbye between her and her friends there and her family at the project, but also the unknown of what she was going to go into. And I remember him just praying over her that what she had learned there and what she had gained through faith would be carried over into the family and home that she was going back to, and that God would continue to strengthen her heart and keep her strong in what she knew about herself as a daughter of God. And so it was really hard. And, it was such a fun celebration. It was fun watching her and her friends get ready. Chelsie and one of our other team members helped did her hair and her makeup, and she got to pick a couple of friends to come and help her get ready. And it was a lot like a prom or a wedding, just getting ready for that, and watching her and her friends just sing along to songs and eat candy and have fun. But then knowing, as she said goodbye to each person that came up to her at the end of her celebration, and the sadness that was there too, was really hard to experience.
What was that like for you, Chelsie?
Just like Tiffany said, it was just trying to be respectful and doing it the way that we should. And with the limited resources we were available, I mean, they ran out and got her crown and her dress that night. And Amber Gangline, she is the director of our children's ministry at church, and she was there, and she is phenomenal of interacting and doing all of those things. And so her and I together set up, the mirror, and Amber had out these little chocolates and had her perfumes and things, and really just seeing her getting to enjoy that, and the way she kept looking back at herself in the mirror was really special. You could tell that she was trying to put the sadness aside and enjoy what she was getting, and her friends are sitting on the bed giggling and pointing out which makeup we should be putting on her eyes and if her hair looks good. And they had us leave the room so she could get dressed, and you could just hear them giggling. And it was just really special to know that she got to have that, because 2 hours later, she knew she was going to be missing it a week from now with her friends. And so it was just really special. And I'm just so thankful that I got to be a part of that.
I love that the project allows for that kind of thing. I talk about this a lot, that teams get to choose what kind of things they're going to do for ministry. And we usually plan them all before we go, and we have it all mapped out. But the willingness to be flexible when we get there, and for the teams to be able to do something like that on a whim because you see a need, it just speaks to the purpose of the whole ministry. Because you think about things here, or a tendency we might have is to stick to the plan, that there isn't time for things like that or something. And the flexibility and the willingness to just jump on board with whatever the team feels like God is leading them to do. It's such a level of trust from the staff and the team coordinators in the Holy Spirit working in that experience to allow us to shift like that and change up things. So I'm so glad that you got to have that experience and give that to her, because it, I'm sure, is something that she's going to remember for the rest of her life.
Us too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Tiffany, you had mentioned this before, but and we talked about it a lot when we chatted before, was you catching the vision and bringing it back. Can you elaborate a little bit on what you think the value of going to the James Project is when we come back? What is it that you get the most out of, do you think?
I think what's hard for our congregation, especially, Chelsie had mentioned that with our mission partners, we not only try to support them financially, but we want to have boots on the ground opportunities. And I think what's difficult about JPLA is that it's located in a country where there isn't an organized mail system that isn't, corrupt. And so it's hard to send items or to, really to be physically present in a way that we can with some of our other partners. And so for those of us that are blessed enough to be able to travel across, the country line and to be there, it's, I think it makes it even more important for us to be able to really get elbows deep in what's going on there and to understand it and to be a part of it so that we can bring it back home and encourage those here to support them in ways that we can. But to also to understand what's going on there, I think is helpful, because there are other ways that we can be helpful here back at home in similar scenarios, but to understand how they're doing it and to apply it to life here. And so we have a mission partner that we kind of jokingly or lovingly call them the JPLA of America, or they're located right here in Kansas. And so they have a foster community where they're doing much of the same thing, where they're trying to lean on a whole community of people that are like-minded and that can pool resources. And so I think in catching that vision, we not only help to ignite just the passion behind supporting JPLA, but also being able to find ways to apply those same principles here back in the States, where there's, also opportunities to serve God in the same way.
Mm-hmm. And you also talked about really trimming the fat in your own life and streamlining some things. Can you give some practical examples of what that would look like for people wondering, I don't think there's any fat in my life, or, that kind of thing? What would you say?
I think for me, it's watching people really focus on what's most important. And I think in the United States, we've kind of painted this picture of you've arrived once you own the, however many square foot home with 2.5 children and a career and, all the bells and whistles. And then we go in the garage, the house, we shut the garage and the front door and we live life alone. And I think that it just becomes this place of like loneliness and anxiety, and we really kind of shy away from what God has called us to do in living life together, living life fully, and sharing that with others. And so I think in Guatemala, you see them because of their generosity and their hospitality and the way that they are such a large family, not just that immediate family, but just a family at large. You see the way that life is supposed to be done. And I think we even read about it, with the early church and the way that they would pool their resources and the way that they would do life together. And so I think it really teaches us to value the things that God values. It's the community and the time together and the relationship. It's not about the entertainment and the attractional model that sometimes I think we lean into too much here in the United States. And so we become too consumeristic, even in our own churches, but just in our lifestyles in general. And so the more that we can, be more missional rather than attractional, I think is a really important thing to learn from those in Guatemala, because I think you see them have a peace that you want as well. And I truly believe that that's why they have it, is that missional heartbeat.
Yeah. And I like that you brought up the communal living type of thing down there. And some of it's from their great need as well. Like when the kids and I have studied the Bible throughout their homeschooling years, and one of the things that we noticed, like if you read about the kings through First and Second Chronicles, you see how some of them started out trying to follow God, and then they got comfortable. They got success, they got comfortable, and all of a sudden they started to go a different way. And I feel like we do that so much up here in the United States. We're too comfortable to feel like we need God. Whereas you go down there and they need him to survive in a way that we don't. So it leads them to him in a much deeper way than we need to be up here sometimes. And that's to our detriment, I think. Sure, it's great to be comfortable, but that's very, not eternal. So I appreciate that part of what you get to experience down there, that great need and who they rely on. It teaches us a lot about what we can do back here to change the way that we view life and the way that we go through life.
Absolutely. And to see them stretch resources the way that they do is just inspirational. You look at even the project themselves, the way that they're so sustainable with like their farming and agriculture, and the way that they teach the children to be a part of all of the chores and that the workings of the house. I think that it really speaks to the way that we've really enabled our children to be a little too comfortable and not stepping into those and acting like they aren't capable, but to watch these little 3 and 4 year olds doing laundry and dishes. And I'm like, my kid is learning to tie his shoes. So, to teach them those like basics of living and really pride and ownership and I guess, a good steward of what they've been given. I think that they just value those things so differently.
Yeah. And really valuing the love above all else, because they don't, you go when you do like the tour and you see their closets, they have very little of their own, possessions, but there's no promotion of that down there. It's not an issue because they're not saying, it's not so consumeristic. They don't need all of these things. You don't need a closet full of clothes. You need what you need. And the rest is the love that you have from God, from the people around you that you can give out. And it prioritizes that in a whole different way than I think that we do up here.
Agreed.
Yeah. And what did you think, Chelsie? What are your thoughts about that? Like coming back, catching the vision. And
before we had gone down there, my
from
husband and I, we talked a lot about what we want for the future. And we've talked about, having a farmstead and not really prioritizing sports and things like that, and just talking about it, not really thinking it was an option. And when I went to Guatemala, just seeing the simplicity of living. And once you, I feel like, take away all of the fanciness and all of the big things, and like the people in Guatemala, focus on the love and then the things that come next. I think my husband and I now more than ever are prioritizing simplifying our life. And, we're ready to move and starting to grow our own food. And we want to teach our kids those values, and we want to teach them the hard work and what you can, accomplish out of that. And I think that's something there too, that those parents really instill in those kids is you have to work hard to get what you want. Like, you can control the outcome when you're leaning on God and putting all of your faith into something and doing the work. And like Tiffany said, watching them, I was giggling because as I came out with my morning coffee, there's a little girl that's trying to clean her paintbrushes in her cup, and she can't even reach the basin. And so she has her hand, she's on her tiptoe, and she's just barely pushing it, and finally gets it, and it spills over and just, explodes everywhere. And she just looks around, and I'm like, I saw that. And I'm like, you're so wet. And she's laughing. And so I just think it's really important to sometimes value the way that they live, because they don't have a lot to value, and they're okay with that. And, they're cooking side by side. And that's something that we are trying to do more, is cooking dinner together as a family. And my kids do love to cook. And so it is really nice because they want to be a part of that, but teaching them how to cook, because you have 8-year-olds over there that are ready to cook and can serve a table of food for people. And I just think it's so important. And I'm really glad that I got to see it firsthand, and hopefully can instill that with my family.
Yeah. And even though they're little, they're doing it because they've been taught to value that. It's not, not child labor or anything. They want to teach them to take care of themselves and to own that they have a role to play in how their life turns out. So teaching them to take care of themselves and clean up after themselves, or cook for people and serve other people. They're all life skills that are uncomplicated there, I think, they're undistracted by all of the extra that we have up here. So
It's,
yeah, it's a lot of
we would go and help cook breakfast at different houses each morning. And there was one house, there were 2 sisters, and the house dad was telling us, it's hit or miss. Like, these 2 girls are sisters, but one of them is ready to learn. Like, she's on fire. She wants to be in the kitchen. She wants to know what ingredients go with what. And he's like, the other one, she's just okay sitting down, waiting to have to be told what to do. So it's not child labor by any means, because he's like, one is going to excel and the other is going to have to figure it out. Like, she's watching us do this. And if that's her choice, that's, we're going to encourage her, but you can't force them to do it. And so
no,
we got this.
yeah. And it's such great examples of parenting. I mean, that's the way we parent up here. You see one child that's really excelling and really internally motivated, and you have another child who's not, and you can't make that happen. You can give them parameters and boundaries and all sorts of things and consequences, but it really has to come from within. They have to decide to do it at some point, and so it's the similarities are there, but their life is so uncomplicated by the extra. So parenting, we all sign up for it when we have kids, and we don't always know what we're getting into. I think it's a good thing we don't always know what we're getting into, but we willingly sign up for it, right? But what I admire so much about those house parents down there is they signed up intentionally for what they knew they would be. I mean, they don't know all the details, but they know this is going to be a harder road. They're going to be parenting kids that are not biologically theirs, that come with a lot of baggage, that come with a lot of trauma, that need a ton of extra attention and love and care. And I just admire so much how willing they are. And some of them have been there for years doing this ministry, and it's hard work. And so I love anytime we get to minister to them. My daughter wanted to wash their feet last year, which was really fun. We did a foot washing thing, but they need as much love as those kids, I think. And so when you see the house parents, do they share things with you? That you said you went in and made breakfast in different houses. Did you hear any stories that really touched your heart about just being parents?
Absolutely. And I think if there's any one encouragement I would make to people that are planning teams trips is to do the breakfast in the homes. As hard as it is to get up that early, it is truly an experience to be a part of that. To sit at someone's table, for one, is already an intimate space as it is, but to watch their families interact and the way that they love on these children is, I think, a testimony in and of itself. But the last morning that we served breakfast in Casa Abigail, the father, Raul, in that house asked if he could share his personal testimony with us. And, a couple of our team members had already really deeply connected with him. But of course, in that moment, we definitely wanted to hear what he had to say. And so he was sharing that him and his wife, Sandy, prior to coming to the project, they owned a business or a restaurant in the city, and that he was the main chef there. And things were really what he would have described as good. They were successful. They didn't have any money issues. Their needs were more than met. It was plentiful is really what he said. And, but he said that he knew Mama Carroll, and that Mama Carroll several times had invited him to come and be a part of the ministry at Shadow of His Wings as a house parent. And I know he said they visited a couple times, but it wasn't until the last time that they visited and decided that they were going to commit to being house parents that the car broke down. And that's where it all kind of started. And he talked about these series of events that just started to go wrong that I think, some people would identify as like signs that this isn't what I'm supposed to be doing. I should run from this. But what he described is that the more that these, what he identified as spiritual warfare and spiritual attacks happened, the more it confirmed to him that God was saying, this is where I want you. And that the enemy was fearful of that. And that he was, trying to threaten them being a part of the ministry because he knew what God was going to do through them. And we could see that, what he was doing with all of the girls that live in his house. He even had a little boy that was part of their house. Even though it was a girls' home, they had a younger little guy that was with him because of his specific trauma that he had experienced. He needed to be with his sisters, and he could not even hear the voice of a male without just absolutely losing it. But Raul, through like time and his energy and his love, learned to gain the trust of this little guy. And he just, you could tell there was just such a bond there, which was such a special thing to hear. And so I think, the enemy was trying to deter Raul and Sandy from being a part of that. And so what was specifically personal about it for me, though, is Raul talked about how he developed a chronic issue with his lower back and that he was experiencing a lot of chronic pain, which for me speaks to me personally because I also have lower back issues and arthritis. And last summer had a major lumbar surgery on my back. And so I felt like in that moment, God was saying, this is for you. I need you to listen to this. And so, he talked about how, when Satan was attacking, that he felt like it was just confirmation for him to lean in further and to trust God, and that the work he was doing was important. And I think it's a reminder for me, especially because I do feel like even in the last year, there's a lot of things that I feel God calling me and our team to, and some big moves that we've tried to make that at times are really hard. And you question, is this from God or is this from Satan? And it really helps to separate those two voices, to look at it through the lens of, this work is important and there's a reason that the enemy is threatened by it. And so for Raul, saying that was just confirmation for him to lean in further was inspiration for me as well, to lean in further and to not be scared off by these spiritual attacks. But it's funny because out of all of the stories I share from last year, from our experience this last trip, that's the one I share the most, because I think it's the most inspirational to hear that someone keeps losing, but it makes them only feel more confirmed that they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So yeah. I think that's invaluable.
Yeah, it is really important, I think, because a lot of people have this misconception that being a Christian, it's a crutch because you want life to be easier. it's not easier. It's a lot harder sometimes because it's a higher standard that you're calling yourself to, or God is calling you to, and you're trying to hold yourself to. And there is opposition to that. I mean, it's countercultural. So whether it's spiritual attacks or whether it's people making fun of you or tearing you down or rejecting you because of your beliefs, it's not easier at all.
Yeah.
And Jesus doesn't promise that it will be. He just says that he's overcome the world. So take heart. So it is a really important thing to remember. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah.
So if there was anyone that was hesitant and listening to this podcast, hesitant about going on a trip like this or visiting the James Project in particular, what would you say to them about their hesitation? What would you say to them?
I'll let you go first, Chelsea. Sorry.
Honestly,
I just don't want to capitalize on anything.
No, I think you should, because this is a question that I struggle with, and I think I could probably maybe be a little off-putting if I answered that to somebody. I think before even I went, I know that we're all busy, and I know that we have a lot going on, and we all have kids, and they have a lot going on, and trying to find even just sitters for those times. I think that our lifestyle also gives us a lot of excuses to put in front of going away and serving these communities that really need it. But in my position at the church, and from all of the things that I have been learning, just diving into the Bible, and we are called to serve our widows and our children. And I know that there can be a lot of, just worry and a lot of scares for going out of the country and going to an unknown place. But like I said before, as long as you can lean on your faith and you pray on it, and I just think if you give it some time and you talk to God about it, and he does tell you maybe this isn't the right time to go, maybe there is a future time, but I think somebody should really lean into prayer and, just trying to open their eyes to maybe if God is telling them you should go, just try to put those worries and those scares aside and just lean into the moment, because you really are already considering it. So I think it just takes a lot of prayer.
That's not an off-putting answer at all. That was good.
No.
That's exactly what I would say. I think, for anybody that's fearful, I think fear is, like I said, again, one of the enemy's easiest scare tactics is just to let us know that we're either inadequate or ill-equipped. And what God has promised us throughout scripture is that we don't need to be, able or equipped. He's able, he's equipping us, and he's working through us. And so anything that I think that would be an obstacle is something that I truly believe God would eliminate, because we've been told to ask for things in prayer in the name of Jesus. And as long as we are asking for what is the will of God, it'll be given to us. And so it, like Chelsie said, lean into prayer, pray for God to give you the strength or the fortitude or the heart or whatever it is that you need to make those things happen, because that is the will of God. We have been called to take care of, like Chelsie said, the orphans and the widows. And so if we're asking for that in Jesus' name, I truly believe that that's something that he will help us overcome and make possible.
Also I wanted to mention too, I know that it sounds like there's a lot of work that we do over there too, but it doesn't matter if, you're 16 or 80, even just to go there and sit and watch, or sit and just be with these kids, is going on the mission trip and doing the mission. It's not, you don't have to go over there and hammer things out day in and day out. There's time to just be with the children. And so if you're worried about any physical disabilities or anything like that, I think a lot of people should just know that it's not all physical labor. And if there are limitations to things that you can or can't do, it doesn't matter. Just being there is enough.
Yeah. And I was just going to add that it is a call that God has put on us to serve orphans and widows. But I try to remind my kids, and I have from the time they were little, was just the return on investment, because to recognize, yes, it's a lot of work, and sometimes we're exhausted. We're always exhausted when we get back, just because of the whole thing. But the return on investment is so deep and rich to us that it's worth the work. It's worth the time. It's worth the sacrifice, in my opinion. Some people would disagree with that, but I like to add that, I talk to my kids all the time about cost benefit analysis and the return on investment. And because I want them to know how to make good choices for their life, not just about missions, but everything. And you really need to look at, is this choice going to move me forward or backward? Or it's such, like you've shared this entire time, the impact on your lives coming home is tenfold what it was, the work and the time that it took to go. It's remarkable how much we get out of just 1 week of the opportunity to be the hands and feet of Jesus in a community of people that is their sole focus in life, is to be the hands and feet of Jesus for those kids and for that community and for everyone involved. It's, I think, definitely worth it. But some people think I'm crazy too. So.
Not at all. It was funny during our worship planning this last week, we were talking about a stewardship series. But he was talking about how his mentor, we'll talk about return on investment, but he talks about return on kingdom investment. Mm-hmm. And so we were just kind of talking about the playoff of words with that. So it's funny that you mentioned that. But yeah, I mean, you do kind of weigh, like, is this advancing the gospel? Is this something I've been called to do? And, what is the return on kingdom investment with it all?
Yeah.
So I don't think you're crazy at all.
Thanks. Appreciate that. And I don't know that people that think I'm crazy, if they would go, they would see that, they would understand a little better. Because like you said at the beginning, this is such a hard thing for people to grasp the magnitude of and what the experience is like until you go. Like, we could talk about it for days and it still wouldn't do justice to the actual experience itself and really, encapsulate all that it entails. So I always end the podcast with this quote that my kids and I have loved for years from Mother Teresa. She says, we can't all do big things or great things, but we can all do small things with great love. And I feel like that's what we've been talking about, is all of the small things with great love that the project does for those kids, for that, the whole community down there, and for us as teams when we go, and then bringing that back. So what does that quote mean to you? Like, when you think about it in those terms, because the word legacy comes up when I think about it. So what do you think is the legacy of the James Project and the legacy of even just your church going down as a team? And what do you hope to leave for a legacy being part of that community? I know that's like a 3-part question, but you could touch on whatever part you want.
When we talk about our outreach, our vision for outreach, we talk about Acts 1:8 and how we talk about how our call is to reach the ends of the earth. And that's not possible just even on our own without the work of the Holy Spirit, but also the multiplication of others. And so I think if we can go with the goal of making a difference in one person's life, that starts a ripple effect. And that's how Christ modeled for us to reach the ends of the earth. And it's something that is it's such a mission field right now that we've been called to reach everybody with his word and with his love and forgiveness. And so if we can go down and make a difference in even one child's life, how, impactful that can be in terms of multiplication and discipleship and outreach.
I love that. And what do you think, Chelsie?
Hearing you just recite that quote, all I have flashing in my head is these little hands, just holding hands with my hands and just the little smiles. And again, to touch on the unconditional love that Christ has for them and for me and for everybody, to just leave that with them, telling them God loves you and is there for you and will always be there for you. You're never alone. And if they do leave the project, hopefully that's one thing that they will take with them. And I don't know, just hearing you say that, just the small things. And I just picture them getting to hold somebody's hand and feel that connection that we all want, and taking that, I think that's a really big thing too. And taking that love with them.
Well, and it sounds like your church as a whole is very invested in leaving that kind of legacy in a lot of different areas, not just the James Project, but I'm really grateful for the work that your church does with the James Project and how you steward your time and your energy to lots of different areas, and you do it well, it sounds like. So I'm really glad that you guys have that opportunity, and the church is supportive of all of that. That is what we're supposed to do, right? Christians acting like Christians is a beautiful thing.
Absolutely. And we're blessed to be able to be even just a small part of it.
Yeah. And I'm grateful for the way that God has weaved your lives together. And I thank you for sharing your stories about how you connected and how God worked in both of you to get you to where you are and to connect the two of you together. And I hope that you get to do lots more mission trips together, and your husbands get to go, and he continues to knit you together in a beautiful way that can impact lots of kids and people and your church, and especially your own kids and for generations to come, because you're starting a ripple effect as well in your own families, especially you, Chelsie, who didn't, not growing up in the faith, to be able to now pass that on to your kids. You're starting a legacy of faith, and it's a beautiful thing. And I can understand where Tiffany's saying how blessed she was to be able to watch you guys all get baptized and see that legacy begin. And she won't see the end of it, and you won't either, but not this side of heaven anyway, but to be able to witness that and be able to walk together now as followers of Christ and do the work together. I'm really happy for both of you.
Thank
you. I appreciate you sharing your stories.
Thanks for the invitation. It's really, like we've said before, it's humbling to be a part of it all. And it's a blessing to be able to even talk about it, because, we don't find a lot of opportunities to talk with someone who's like-minded. And so just to be able to relive some of these moments is just, it's like being spiritually nourished and reminded of what we experienced there and what we can do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so important to just remember. And anytime we do get to share, I feel like that's what we're doing. We're remembering how God showed up for us. We're remembering where we saw his work and his hand and his love. And it is refreshing. It is renewing for us at the same time. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to do this. So I appreciate your time today. And I hope I get to talk to you guys again about another trip.
Us too.
Okay.
Thank you, Kathy.